Welcome to the Thought Leadership Series featuring interviews with some of the best minds in the industry. Today's special guest is popular platform speaker and best-selling author Don Spini. Hi, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and talk show host. In this segment, we're going to talk about why selling doesn't produce sales. We're going to address the stats, the facts, and the big reveal, all from Don's book, 60 Seconds to Yes. Welcome to the show, Don.
Thank you, Steve. Glad to be here.
All right. Well, I'm always touched by when we title things like, guess what? Selling doesn't produce sales. Now, how can that be true?
Well, when I get in front of a room and I say that, you can hear a pin drop. He goes, well, wait a minute. Look at all this stuff. Look at all that's here. All that's created is because of sales. But I also say this. Look, folks, there's no evidence that selling works or that sales are actually produced. Look at the evidence in our industry in the financial services. 1 out of 100, 1% make it in this business in sales. Think about that. People brag in these incredible training organizations that, well, after 5 years, we still have 15% in the business. Where else is that acceptable? We accept this blind statistic and say, well, that's just fine. 1% is a fine statistic. Where else is that acceptable? Think about if I had an airline, Spini Airlines, where only 1% of the planes land. What other industry is that acceptable? There's no evidence that selling works. Believe me, if selling and sales training at this point works, the federal government would pay for it for us. Why? Because it would drive up revenue. We would solve all the money problems in this world. But we just keep doing the same thing called selling. There's no evidence that it works, and people end up saying, well, either I'm just lucky, I'm the 1% that's lucky, or the 99% are lazy and unmotivated. Neither one of those are true.
Well, Don, how can I change the paradigm in our industry, especially the financial services and the industry and insurance industry? I want us to do better.
Yes.
So what do we have to do to change that?
Well, there's a bitter pill that we have to swallow. One is we have to admit that what we've been doing doesn't work. That people come to us and they have a massive need that we have to admit that it doesn't work. And I say to people, hey, it's okay to say this, but you have to admit this. Mm-hmm. We've been doing it wrong. We've been doing it wrong. Because there's no evidence that it works, let's admit that we've been doing it wrong. Selling to me, and by the way, I'll tell people this, the first 10 years I was in this business, I failed. And again, the problem was I could talk to people, I had a personality, I wasn't shy. Why did I fail? I did all the sales training, I read all the books, I was mentored by the best. Why did I fail? Was I lazy and unmotivated? No. No one could tell me why I was failing. No one can tell these other 99% why they're failing. Selling is unnatural. The act of selling is unnatural. We're taught to speak different, to posture different. Think about it. Mm-hmm. When you're in a sales situation with somebody outside of any industry, you're in a sales situation. And you and I, when we're just buying something, can feel uncomfortable. And here's what I want to say to people. When you layer an unnatural act, like selling, on top of a natural process, like buying and making decisions, which we do every day, all day long, just fine. When you take an unnatural act and lay it upon a natural act, it causes resistance. It causes people's defenses to go up. And I think about how I used to talk in sales, and Steve, let me ask you some questions. Mm-hmm. All these weird postures that made that person uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. We're taught to do that. We're taught, again, inadvertently, unknowingly, we're taught to raise people's defenses. And in an industry like insurance and financial services, that's devastating.
So you really want to set aside all the pre-marketing scripts. Yes. And everything we've been doing. All right, let's say we're ready to go that way because the stats speak for themselves.
Yes,
if we're not really in our industry, by the way, has been flatlining now for some time.
Absolutely.
Tell me, you have this idea called the big reveal from your book, 60 Seconds to Yes. Tell me why this is such a big revelation to most people.
Well, because they know it. And when I give you, quote unquote, the big reveal, everybody knows this. Mm-hmm. But everybody, again, has gone into resistance when it comes to sales. And I'll give people the big reveal. Again, to me, it's not a secret. Mm-hmm. But when we live in denial and we don't want to admit what I'm about to say, it causes massive failure. And I'll say this, people sell differently all over the place, and we want that. We don't want people to change their personalities. We don't want people to be unnatural. Everybody sells different, and that's great. But the big reveal that I discovered back in 1995, which changed everything, which, by the way, goes counter to everything we've been told in sales and business, but in every other aspect of life, everybody knows this, is this. Every human being on this planet has two things and only two things in common. And if you're going to be influential, you're going to be successful in sales, you need to know this. Number one is we are all the same species. That's important to know. We are all human beings. We have the basic same DNA. Why is that important? Because animals are the same species. do things a certain way. This shark hunts the same way. All these sharks in this class species hunt the same way. All those chickens lay eggs the exact same way. Well, we also do things the same way, which leads to the second thing we all have in common. And if you don't know this, it is devastating in business. And that is every human being on this planet, every human being makes decisions the exact same way. And when I say that in a room full of people, you can just feel the skepticism. Wait a minute, no. I make decisions totally different than everybody else, folks. I can prove it. But if you don't, and I ask people, if that's true, so I haven't proven it yet, but if that is true, do you think it's important to know that process? If there is a natural process, do you think it's important to know that process, folks? It is everything to know that process. And we have ignored the natural decision process in the world of sales and sales training.
For more information on the stats, the facts, and the big reveal and how that can impact your practice, just click on the landing page address in the video description. We'll be right back with more from Don Spini.
This is your website. Few people visit, and if it isn't attracting new visitors, it's not doing its job. Now you can drive more visitors to your website through dynamic content and email marketing with CreativeOne's Social Media Elite. Capture quality leads faster and easier. Engage your visitors with informative articles and videos to boost your online credibility. Plus, stay connected with existing clients and earn more referrals. All content is customized for you. It's time to introduce your website to the world. Call your CreativeOne sales team at 800-992-2642 or visit us online at creativeone.com.
In this segment, we're going to talk about why selling doesn't produce sales. We're going to review the decision-making process that clients go through, and it's all from Don's book, 60 Seconds to Yes. Don, when we're talking about the decision-making process, I didn't know I had to get inside somebody else's head to make this sale come to pass. Walk me through this process and why it's so important.
Yeah, and one of the, again, controversial statements that people say about my program is I debunk some myths. And I say that there is a natural process to making decisions. We all go through that process the same way. We may invest more time as different people in certain areas of that process, but there is a process, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the controversy is this. And again, this kind of goes against what we've been taught. See, we've been taught that the yes comes from my fancy presentation. I've done the needs analysis, and I've been taught all these methods and these ways to handle objection. Then I do the big close, and then you say yes. That's not true at all. Nowhere else in our life is that true. In the process, the natural process, and this is a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. The decision to buy, or the decision to say yes to anything, is made first in the very beginning of the process. Now, that debunks the myths we've been told our whole life. No. Where's my presentation? No, the decision to buy is made before you ever opened your mouth and start talking about your product, your company, your service, your idea. Again, people don't believe that until they go through my program. They go, oh my gosh, you're right, that is natural. The decision to buy is made first in every other aspect of our life, but we've been taught in an industry where there's 99% failure, the decision's made way after that. So in this process, we show you how to respect that. And you mentioned it here just now. This process takes place in the subconscious mind. Influential people that can affect this process learn the skill, which is my program, of speaking to the subconscious mind. It's called buyer conditioning. But it triggers that mechanism, that motivation that gets people to say yes. Sales training has not done that up to this point.
Okay, so if we're going to have to set aside a whole, I'm thinking people like myself, 25, 30 years in this business, we're going to have to set aside everything we've learned. Is the unlearning process a little bit part of this process too? Because how am I going to go in and adopt your way of doing things when I've been doing something so long, my personality is almost in concrete?
No, what happens, Steve, is when people see the natural process, they go, oh my gosh, I've been doing that in a lot of aspects of my life. I may not have had names for it, but for most people, the reconditioning is instant. Because once they relate what we're talking about to how they make decisions in all other aspects of their life, they go, oh, you're right, that is true.
Well, what's the first step in your process then?
The first step in my process is I have to make sure that this person is actually in the decision process at a very conscious level.
How do you pre-qualify that?
It's very simple to do. I can trigger that mechanism in you. I can initiate in you your decision process. See, another big myth in this industry is that for someone to say yes to my stuff, they have to have a real deep predisposed interest. That's not true at all. People will come into my office or your office and they won't even know why they're there. The first thing we do is we do a process called buyer conditioning. What does that do? That speaks to the subconscious mind and gets them ready mentally for my presentation. And I say to folks, this is not about me. I don't talk about me, my product, my service, my idea. I talk about them and their subconscious mind. And I can physically see these folks getting more and more conditioned and preparing for my presentation. Here's what the goal is. We certainly don't have time to go through the whole conditioning process here, but I'll tell you what I'm looking for. When I communicate in this manner with this person, here's what's going to happen at the end of this process. This is my trigger mechanism that they're ready for my presentation. Is they're going to look across the table at me and they're going to say, oh my gosh, Don, I am totally screwed up. I didn't even know how screwed up I was. Can you help me? Think how easy it is to sell from that perspective. That's not what most people do. Most people get in, they say, well, nice tie, nice family, let's talk about your finances and let me tell you what I can do. Think of the power you have when people ask you for help as a sales professional. How much easier it is to sell from that perspective. See, too many people are out there doing the what the heck am I here for presentation. That's hard. I can't even teach people that. What I want to teach and train people on is how to take somebody who's in a position of super high interest and just hold that interest for a few more minutes.
So somehow in your process, you've had the client or the prospect come to the conclusion that they do need help and that their situation right now really needs your advice.
Absolutely. And again, this may not make sense to you. Listen to this now. It will show you the solution. But I have to get you to say yes to my product, my service, my idea from a position of high interest, get this, without me ever speaking about my product, my service, my idea. And again, that is so counterintuitive to everything I've been talking to people. How? That makes no sense, Don. Well, I'll tell you, it may not make sense when you hear it there, but it is the absolute natural process. So when somebody says to me, I need help, what do you have? That's when my presentation begins. That's called buyer conditioning, and that is, it's elusive in sales training and sales today.
I'm looking at, during this time, do you ever have clients object down this pathway of decision-making process that you've laid out?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we hear the term object and objections. And I'll tell people this, in this process, when you and I are in this process, this decision process, this not mystical but very specific process, there are no objections. If people truly objected, they wouldn't be in that process. But again, we've been taught this unnatural method of handling objections, like, I don't think I can afford this. People hear that, and they think that's an objection. And we're taught clever ways to retort and to respond to that don't work. By the again, no evidence of those work. There are problems that need to be addressed in this process. And there's one big concern, and that's another big reveal I'm going to give you here shortly. But when people are in this process, there are no objections. They're looking to say yes. And if you know they're in this decision process, again, very tangible, I can physically see people in this process, you know they're there to say yes. So when we use the term objections, it puts us as a seller, as a salesperson, kind of on the defensive, like I'm battling you. Oh, you object to the idea. No, they don't. If they objected, they wouldn't be there.
Well, there's a lot of information on the decision-making process, and if you want more information on it and how it can help you build out your business, just click on the landing page address in the video description. And don't forget, you can follow us on social media and visit our webpage. I'm Steve Savant. We'll see you next time on the Thought Leadership Series, and remember, keep thinking outside the box.